Talk about vicious. Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts just pummeled one of Donald Trump's highest-profile cabinet secretaries. Warren tore into Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who tried to defend Trump's tax and spending bill. The exchange started simply.
Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator Warren.
You're the Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you, what is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you.
Warren noted that conservative organizations have also criticized the Big Beautiful Bill Act and say it will explode the national debt. This includes the Conservative Tax Foundation and the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, and more.
Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
That is how witty and fast Senator Warren is. To say she is quick on her feet would be an understatement. Back to Treasury Secretary Bessent.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
okay, so,
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
No, I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score.
Not only is there no tariff bill to score, there are also no tariff deals yet from the Trump administration. Back in April, when Donald Trump announced his global tariffs, the Trump White House predicted there might be 90 deals in 90 days. So far, there are none. There are sub-deals or agreements in principle with China and the UK, but when it comes to comprehensive agreements that businesses, investors, and others can analyze and examine, say for tariff revenue that comes into Washington, there is nothing.
Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
And that is arguably the best question from any member of Congress this year.
Well, first of all, huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator. And I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you? We're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care.
Well, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is an amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
First of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes
it's clear,
and rewards.
Secretary Bessent, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering it.
No, you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care. Matters so much, but it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
Wow. Elizabeth Warren knows these issues better than anybody in Washington. Her approach is direct, emphatic, and matter of fact. In other words, Trump officials like Scott Bessent don't stand a chance against Warren. Also, the Trumpsters are literally trying to defend the indefensible. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act slashes Medicaid, takes away health care from millions of people, and cuts food stamps, ensuring that some people will go hungry on top of facing financial ruin if they get sick and need medical care. At the same time, the bill gives tax cuts to the wealthy. But it gets even worse. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office just released new projections, and this graph: average annual change in household resources as a percentage of current law income after transfers and taxes 2026 to 2034. The highest or richest 10% of Americans will see their household income rise by about 3%. The lowest or poorest 10% of Americans will see their household income drop by 4%. As economist and writer Paul Krugman recently noted in his Substack, that 4% income decline for the poorest 10% of Americans is the scale of economic damage you'd expect from a severe recession. But here it is being deliberately inflicted on the poorest Americans. And as Krugman points out, the CBO doesn't even consider the effect of Trump tariffs on household incomes. And tariffs are regressive taxes. They fall more heavily on lower income families. So the 4% income decline for the poorest group of Americans could be even worse, perhaps 6 or 7%. The bottom line is that the Trump GOP bill is going to take money away from 80% of the American public. And because of tax cuts for the rich, the federal deficit is going to explode. That's why the voice of Senator Elizabeth Warren and others is so important. This stuff is going to impact all of us. And by the way, Senator Warren has hammered Trump Republicans repeatedly this year. Last month, Warren blasted CNBC host Sarah Eisen, who tried to defend Trump taking away Harvard University research grants.
You know what? Instead of just mouthing off about what you think is happening, actually present some evidence. And let's look at the evidence. Let's let the other side come in and question that evidence. But you don't just get to lip off and say, and therefore the king gets to wave his magic wand and say, off with your head.
Doesn't the government determine where federal tax dollars go? And so they're allowed to decide.
Do you think they have a big bushel basket of money and they just say, you, good looking, you will have money. You, not so good looking, you're going to have to go hungry for a while. That's not how it works. Let's just do Conlaw 101, and that is, Congress writes those laws and allocates that money. The administration's job is to enforce those laws and spend that money the way the law tells them. And if they fail to do that, part 3 is the courts are the ones who step in and enforce the law.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Warren's urgency in speaking out against most things Trump, including his tax and spending bill, is noteworthy. And Warren's willingness to blast Trump staffers and sycophants to their face is inspiring. By the way, Donald Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, in condemning attacks on police in Los Angeles, is taking irony to unprecedented levels.
These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted, and spray painted anti-American slogans on buildings. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility.
He has just returned to the White House and is signing a series of executive actions in the Oval Office, where he is pardoning some 1,500 January 6 rioters who have been convicted.
Approximately 1,500 for a pardon. Yes. Full pardon.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from Mark, who wrote, "That cross has to be burning her skin." I hear you. I look forward to reading your comments about Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren rhetorically ripping the face off of Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.